This week, industrial executives, White House officials, and big investors met in Detroit for the Reindustrialize Summit, which has a simple stated goal: making things in America. Speakers hammered home the idea that industrial power feeds military power, feeds global power.
For too long, too many people, including on my side of the aisle, told us that we no longer needed to make things here, that trade would turn our enemies into friends, that cheap imports were a substitute for national strength. But great nations do not merely consume. Great nations create. As Secretary of State, I see this every day. Foreign policy is not just summits and speeches. Foreign policy is real power exerting itself upon the world. And power is the ability to act, to build, to create, to do so on one's own terms without asking permission.
Colin Demarest is at Axios, where he covers the future of defense, and he was in Detroit this week. He joins us now. Colin, it's so nice to see you. I think the first time we met, you were literally standing in front of a giant drone at one of these defense forums. Talk to us.
That is correct.
Talk to us about this one. There are like three causes that they're rallying around, right? Improving American production scale and speed, fostering the stateside build, baby, build culture, and reestablishing supply chain sovereignty. Did any of those really rise to the front of the pack, and why now?
I think you lifted that from my newsletter, so thank you in the first place. But I think
we read your stuff, buddy. We read your stuff.
Yeah, okay, perfect. I think all three of those were addressed over the 2 days in Detroit. But I think really what the movement or the conference really boils down to is you can have a gun, but if you don't have bullets, what's the gun worth? Like you need to be able to build things for deterrence to work. You need to have these drones, these shells, these missiles. For someone to believe that the military is strong, you have to back it up through production. And I think that came through very strong earlier this month.
Colin, talk about the moment that we're in right now. We're in this kind of 60-day period as these negotiations take place, or are slated to take place in Switzerland. But a lot of the commentary surrounding the U.S. arsenal is we've depleted a lot on this war over the last 100+ days. How much was that kind of resonant as you talked to people at this conference, just about the way that this conflict has reframed the way that the Pentagon looks at its weapons supply?
I think the people in Detroit saw it as evidence that they're on the right track, right? If you look at a CSIS study that just came out, it said some of America's most important interceptors would take 3 years to replenish. So the people on the ground in Detroit, I think, took this as a vote of confidence that they're doing the right thing, that they're trying to rebuild these factories, trying to rebuild these supply lines to replenish the U.S. stockpiles in a moment like this.
And I think you actually asked our ambassador in the UN, Mike Wells, about that ammo shortage. I think we've got the sound for you.
The world also knows when we are low on munitions. They know when we've lost our industrial capacity. I'm not going to get in. I'm not going to get in on that, but it's not where it should be, right? And so, so the real strength of the United States isn't necessarily our military, it's our economy, and it's that arsenal of democracy.
When you look at private sector interest, are private sector entities investing in this idea? Are they interested in helping make this happen? Is it something that they see an economic future and benefit in?
Yeah, I think we're seeing just an incredible flood of private capital going into the defense industry right now, especially like the defense tech angle. These smaller companies, these startups who are kind of grappling and wrestling with maybe the older primes like the Lockheeds and the Northrops, but increasingly as well, they're working together. And so I think there's a bit of a community developing here, and there's certainly a lot of money. I know earlier you guys were mentioning $9 million lost on a bet. $9 million in this community right now is really nothing at all.
This show is starting to make me feel very broke, guys, but that's fine. We'll move on.
Colin, we were watching what unfolded in Evian last week. We had the president of Ukraine there talking with leaders from Europe and the U.S. as well. And a point that he's made to all of them, I think, and to leaders in the Middle East is that Ukraine's success, such as it's had success over the course of this war that it's engaged in, is by virtue of thinking entrepreneurially about the kind of weapons it uses, relying on drones more, using technology that's effectively a lot less expensive than what the U.S. historically has been relying on. Talk a bit about that pivot point as well, if you would, and how that's kind of shaping the conversation. You mentioned the primes historically have built big, expensive weapons. Is the shift starting to affect them as well?
I think the shift is starting to affect them. Maybe it's how quickly they produce something or the cost of something they produce. But I also would hazard to say we're going to need tanks and aircraft carriers and F-35s and the like for a very long time. We still have the F-47 in production with Boeing. We have, or being developed by Boeing, excuse me. We have F/A-XX in the running. That said, though, Ukraine's success is honestly incredible. They've really flipped warfare on its head, I would say. The use of these cheap drones worldwide is just, I don't think there's a going back to a point prior to this.
Talk to us a little bit about long-term goals, because when you are looking at these bigger, industrial base projects, they take multiple years, and it's going to take a long time to get this up and running. How concerned are these investors, are these private sector entities that, yes, this is an administration that's very supportive of that, but political uncertainty could change that. The economy could change that. Is there a concern that the U.S. is able to be less competitive with long-term goals than someone like China, who has the ability to plan out decades in advance due to they know who their president is going to be?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. I think Reindustrialize's biggest Achilles heel is how long this will take. I mean, I talk to people to reindustrialize America entirely might take 20, 30 years. That's a lot of elections. Yeah. That's a lot of potential wars. That's a lot of boom and bust cycles. And investors definitely have this question of like, where is my money? The Department of Defense works on very long return cycles. And I think that is definitely something to keep an eye on.
Colin, before we let you go, just give us a sense of who was at this conference. You speaking there, of course, to the U.S. ambassador to the UN, but in terms of government participants, corporate participants, kind of what was the mix there in Detroit?
I described it as a motley crew in the newsletter you guys read. It's really an interesting crowd. It's graphic designers. It is the primes. It's the startups. It's missile makers, car makers. There's a really wide range of people there at Reindustrialize. And last year, I think my favorite phrase that I used was Palantir protesters in front of the Gucci store. And I think that's the perfect summation.
We're going to leave it there. How can we top that?
All right. Well, if you want more, he does have a newsletter.
Yes,
we highly endorse it here at Bloomberg.